Hello everybody, my name is Paul and welcome back to the new news. I hope that everyone's having a fantastic day. I hope that you, your family, and your friends are safe, and if not, I do hope that you find that safety and security in the very near future. There is a ton of stuff that's been happening over the last 24 hours across the globe, and especially inside the country of Ukraine. Of course, last night when we reported, it was the very early hours of the morning for Ukraine, and today is Ukraine's Independence Day. There's been a lot that's been ongoing, a lot of skepticism as to what would happen throughout the day, and unfortunately, it would seem that the two different scenarios were in fact true. What we end up seeing today is quite, there's a lot of good stuff, but there's also some very bad stuff as well. And across the globe, we have different situations ongoing, of course, but needless to say, you can help. And the way that you can help is by checking out the video description. Everything that we do here is for charities. Everything that we do is to help people all throughout this globe and to give back to the very news that we deliver every single day. We're never doing super chats on this channel. We're never pushing any kind of merchandising. 100% of everything we're going to do is for charity and charity alone. So if you check out in the video description, you're going to see a ton of different locations, not just for Ukraine, but for other locations throughout the world as well. Places like Somalia, places like Ethiopia, places like Southeast Asia. And we're constantly looking to add more to that list. So we actually had reached a milestone of about a month ago where we actually couldn't put descriptions with the amount of fundraisers and organizations that you guys had given us. And that's amazing. We want to be able to fill all 5,000 characters within the description with nothing but links to those organizations, to those fundraisers. So please be sure to check out not just Ukraine but all of them, and give your give as much support as you can. If you can't give a lot to these organizations, give a little, and if you can't give anything at all, that's okay too. Help us grow this thing. The more people that are here and the more people that come here enjoy the news overall, then the more of an impact we will have as a community on helping people that are going through the crises that we deliver here every single night. So please help us support. Please continue your unwavering support through these endeavors. I can't thank you guys enough for the amount of support you've already given us, and already given even more so to these organizations. It's been incredible. So please, if you have more organizations too, especially in areas that we don't already cover, please jump on our Discord. Our link is in the description below, and you'll be able to actually get in contact with a staff member on there and shoot us a link and give us a short summary of what that organization does. We're going to go through and we're going to vet that. 80% of those organizations in the description, 80% of all of their donations that they receive actually go to their programs, meaning they actually go to helping people, while only 20% or less in most cases actually goes to those salaries and administration's costs. So please be sure to continue to give their support, and let us know if you have another one. We want to keep adding to it. Other than that, we're going to go ahead and start moving into the news. But before I do, I highly encourage you guys to ask questions and make comments. I am monitoring the chat throughout the stream. And the thing is that a lot of this stuff can be very complicated. I understand that, especially when it comes to conflicts and stuff going on. A lot of people are interested in a little bit more of the details as well, especially why things are happening the way they are. I try to consider myself a little bit well-versed to give you an understanding of what my expertise actually are. I was an 0352 anti-tank missileman in the United States Marine Corps between 2016 and 2020. I did 2 deployments, my first deployment to Syria and my second deployment to Iraq. I was a corporal, and so I specialize specifically in anti-armor warfare and armored warfare doctrine, specifically when it comes to maneuverability with, or specifically when it comes to Russian military doctrine for their armored forces, all of which are mechanized. So please, if you have questions, especially in those areas of expertise, I'd be more than happy to answer them with the public release knowledge. I'm not going to disclose anything that I shouldn't. So, but please feel free to ask questions. I will give you the best answer I possibly can on anything that you may ask. And if I don't know, I'll just tell you I don't know, because I'm not an expert in everything. So with that knowledge going forward, we're going to jump right into the news. We're going to jump right into our main report of the night and our special report, which of course is Ukraine, the ongoing conflict there, the ongoing war, which at this point it's 6 months. Ukraine has survived 6 months of war as of today. The war began on the 24th of February of this year, and then today is obviously August the 24th. So not only is it Ukraine's Independence Day today, but it also marks 6 months of war, a war that was only meant to last, according to the Russians, 72 hours. And it has completely baffled all of the international experts regarding this, because on paper, Ukraine shouldn't have lasted nearly as long as it has. But through sheer determination and tenacity and absolute just immense willpower, Ukraine has been able to claw their way out of what was intended to be an almost instant defeat into what is quickly becoming a very good victory for them. But we actually start off the night, and you see a little paw print, and usually behind a paw print, there is a Patron. In fact, Patron got up and did a little bit of a photo shoot for us today, and to wish everyone a happy, 31st Independence Day. And he's just adorable. Patron, for those that don't know, it means cartridge in Ukrainian, and he is a Ukrainian bomb-sniffing dog. He's this little tiny dog. His vest, you can carry him around like a suitcase. He's adorable. I love this thing. He's adorable. And so that's what we have here. We can see photos of Patron wishing us a happy 31st Independence Day for Ukraine. So amazing to see. He's just the goodest boy. I mean, how can you not love that face? You can't not love that face. It's impossible. I'm sorry. And as we move away from the cult of Patron over there, and yes, it has turned into a cult. I would die for that dog, that's for sure. As we move down here, and we start immediately getting into the meat and potatoes of the war. Now, the meat and potatoes of the war is ongoing in the Donbass, which really encompasses mostly the east and the south part of Ukraine. This is where the most intense fighting is ongoing, and this is where we're seeing major offensive operations ongoing within the region, specifically when you're talking about Soledar, Bakhmut, Toretsk, everything just north of Donetsk, and really just outside of the Luhansk Oblast. This area right here is a main axis of advance for the Russians. In fact, we saw a ton of precursor bombardments. We knew Bakhmut was already an objective pretty early on in the war, and we continue to kind of see that as they are actually fighting, or urban fighting last reported in Soledar, where you also see intensified fighting in Bakhmut, and we will continue to kind of move into that. But the first thing that we actually have is our daily Donetsk update. This comes from Pavel Kolenko, who's the head of the Donetsk Regional Military Administration. He's the head guy within this entire oblast when it comes to their military and the territorial defense units. And every single day he releases a statement regarding what happened 24 hours prior within his oblast. And what he says is, quote, "Russian aggressors fired missiles at the Donetsk region on August 23rd. One person was killed and 2 citizens were injured." So every single day we get an update as to what's happening within that oblast, especially when it comes to casualties and rocket strikes and stuff like that. And occasionally he also posts stuff on his Twitter on his official Twitter that allows us to kind of see some of the footage that comes out. Fortunately, we don't have anything like that today, but we did have some yesterday, and we try to find as much as we can for that from him for you guys, because that's a pretty good first-person account and a very good credible source on that. As we are moving into this Donbass, though, and this offensive, what we see is actually over here. We have it geolocated. The tag itself is not, but I did give you the geolocation. This is at Pokrovske. Once again, I'm sorry if I mispronounce things. Someone actually sent me a thing to learn how to pronounce different cities in Ukraine. And I am going to be checking that one out. Thank you, whoever sent that to me on the Discord. It's very much needed. But what we see here is that RT, which is a Russian state-run media network, is actually, they had reporters embedded with Russian forces there on the front lines. And they came under a very intense Ukrainian artillery barrage today, which they ended up catching on video while they were there. And we actually have that for you right here today. Take a look.
Стреляла в кур, въебала, бать. Да, я ж вам говорил, она сначала по ответке будет, по самому миномету хуярить. А это уже Панама, бать. Ну, а вот она, метров 50.
And so, as you can tell, not a situation I would like to find myself in. I have been shelled before. It's not a very fun experience because it's all up to just fate. And that I hate. I have a little bit of a control complex. I like to be in control of a situation. And the issue is that there is no control when it comes to indirect fire and artillery and rockets and stuff coming in. When I was at the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad, they shelled us for like a month and a half. And just every night, sometime between 5 p.m. local and like 2 a.m. because whatever. That's about the time that they would shell us, and I hated that feeling because there's nothing you can do. You're just kind of hoping it just doesn't land near you, and that's about it. But Bazinga, a local person within the kind of the OSINT community, which is open source intelligence. For those that don't know what all the OSINT tags are, he also was referenced by Bellingcat. Which is also a pretty credible source for anyone that's trying to get information, more technical information on what's going on in the war. You can go check out that. But he did end up confirming the geolocation of this. We actually have where he did that here. So he's able to identify some key features there in the terrain, and is able to go on just Google Maps, believe it or not, and be able to kind of plot out, okay, this is what these, he can mark what's going on here, and he can identify it just from that. The thing is that this age of warfare, there will never be a war prior to this. This is much of a gold mine for intelligence. A lot of people talk about, TikTok, how reliable is that? Well, believe it or not, everyone in the world has a cell phone, pretty much. I mean, I've been in places that I was like, there's no way. How do you even have cell signal here? And they have a cell phone and a smartphone and a camera. They can't feed themselves, but they have one. And that means that everybody has a phone and can record what's happening in the world around them. There has been no war up until this point, no matter how many reporters have been embedded, no matter how many books have been written, that has been so heavily reported upon as this one. It'd be impossible to sort through all of the footage that comes out in a day, in order to report on the news, in the utmost accuracy by any group of individuals. It would take hundreds. And that's the thing, TikTok. People are posting TikToks of what's happening. Russians are doing it. Ukrainians are doing it. All sorts of people are doing that. You see people posting stuff on Twitter. You see people posting stuff all over the place. And it's, on YouTube, obviously. And that's the crazy thing. We don't have to just rely on what the government is telling us and what any of these government statements or official military statements. It's great for confirmation, but we can see in real time and be able to locate ourselves with a little bit of thought and know-how what's happening, where it's at, and it's a gold mine if you're in the intelligence community. We know that there are artillery strikes that have targeted Russian positions because they posted videos online, and it had very devastating effects on the Russians when that occurred. And so we're going to see a lot more out of this war than any other war in history. It was heavily touted during the Iraq War and during Vietnam how heavily reported on it was. And there's nothing to compare it to this war. There's been nothing like it in human history, and it will take decades to just sift through the footage that has come out once this is all said and done. As we jump down here over to Horlivka, what we do also end up seeing is that a Russian logistical center has been once again hit by Ukrainian forces. Ukrainian forces today, their artillery at the very least, conducted a massive amount of strikes all throughout the country. It was extremely effective, and we see them once again targeting logistical and command and control and communication centers, degrading the Russian ability to even launch offensives and maintain rates of fire, and therefore degrading their ability to continue to fight this war in any meaningful way or make any meaningful gains on the front lines. What we're seeing here is that here in Horlivka, for whatever reason, the sky has been filled with black smoke, and it is very clear that a Ukrainian strike has hit a Russian military target within the city. We can go ahead and take a look at this. And you see those plumes of smoke that are just rising up from these locations. While we can't identify whether or not this was an ammunition depot or whatnot, we haven't been able to find any more evidence regarding this. It's very telling that the Ukrainians did strike this again. Horlivka is located very close to Donetsk, and it makes it a prime area, and we know it's been used pretty heavily in using as a ammunition storage location as well as logistical command and control hub. Horlivka has been hit several times in the past, and we've seen that the Russians just kind of move from building to building as they get destroyed, not really deviating from where they're actually positioning their main hubs and depots here on the front lines. Not that it would probably make a lick of difference here during this war. As we jump over here, another possible major Ukrainian strike occurred here in Kryvovsk, which is near Donetsk as well. This is a pretty huge cloud of smoke drifted over the city today, Ukraine, and as that is, it appears once again Ukraine is striking pretty hard at a lot of Russian targets today, at least with their artillery and long-range precision weapons. This is well within the range of HIMARS, even without, say, the ATACMS, which is a pretty big clicky word right now, even though we can't confirm nor deny that Ukraine has them. But this is still well within even some of those lesser, shorter distance, shorter range munitions for the HIMARS that Ukraine is operating at this time that we know that they have been given. We can go ahead and take a look at that here.
Ой, блядь, это пиздец, глянь, какое оно все. Прикинь, оно весь Кировску так затмило. Ты идешь когда по улице, это ужас. Огонь, блядь, огонь!
So obviously something major has indeed occurred there, and we will probably have to get further confirmation as to what is actually happening and going on. As we move over here, this is over in Rovniki, and this is actually in the Luhansk Oblast, just across the border. What this is that another column of Russian troops has been spotted moving through the village of Rovniki, and it's on its way likely to areas such as Soledar and Bakhmut, where they are taking obviously substantial losses as they're conducting ground campaigns within this region. Unsurprising, as Russia continues to just pump men and materials into this war after taking really what should be considered unsustainable losses at this point. While there is quite significant losses, we here at the channel do believe that there is some inflation, at least on the part of the Ukrainians, as to the dead and wounded and the amount of destruction. That is because there is an information war going on. Russia is going to deflate its numbers. It's going to make it seem like the situation is not as bad as what is being said. Even though the campaign was only meant to last 72 hours, no one outside of the major, command can actually, within Putin's inner circle, can actually confirm that that was the case. And at least especially to the Russian people, where they have very restricted access to any kind of outside knowledge or information, unless you're operating with a VPN and watching this, which, by the way, I welcome you as well. But there is a ton of stuff that they're pumping into this. Russian battalion tactical groups, they started at about 15 at the early part of the war. We do know that most of those were rendered combat ineffective relatively early on, and we see that especially in the northern sectors, and we see that BTGs, instead of being rotated out, were slammed together with half strengths in order to bring up a full strength battalion tactical group, and they're pulling reserves out of other parts of the country and possibly even rotating some out of Syria from their southern command and bringing them into the front here, as we've seen in Syria units that were clearly labeled with Ukrainian invasion markings. At this point, we can't really confirm that, but it doesn't seem that the Russians are actually rotating their forces out, and if they are, they're not doing it very often, leading to a much more extensive combat ineffectiveness and, of course, demoralization of those forces. We can go ahead and take a look as these troops are heading out to the front lines. Once again, these are Russian forces headed there, likely to be reinforcing and replacing losses sustained in combat during those offensive operations that we've been seeing. And so once again, we're seeing those losses, or we're seeing those units moving up to the front lines. There was quite a significant surge of troops. We haven't quite seen nearly as much of that. We don't know if that's just a lack of reporting. However, we can suspect that as offensive operations continue, troops will continue to surge into that area. And what we're still waiting to see within this entire region is when that main ground offensive campaign is going to begin against Slavyansk, which is expected to be yet another major kind of axis of advance for the Russian forces, and has been receiving a quite immense amount of precursor bombardment. You can break down Russian doctrine really into two phases, if you would like. And those phases are as follows. You begin with a precursor bombardment. It's meant to soften up resistance. All this does is it levels anything in the path of whatever you're getting ready to drive through there. And what you're getting ready to drive through there, these battalion tactical groups, Russia doesn't operate any kind of light infantry regiments or battalions or anything. None of their forces are light infantry. Everything is either mechanized or it's motorized, meaning they're all in vehicles. That is why you're seeing those Russian tanks operating by themselves, BMPs and BMDs and BRDM2s, all operating by themselves with no supporting infantry assets, because all of their forces are mechanized. They're mechanized very heavily. They rely on their tanks and their armored vehicles, which are relatively obsolete and outdated. Most of the stuff that Russia's fielding is going to be former Soviet stockpile equipment. The BM-21 Grads, you're seeing BMP-1s all the way up through BMP-2s and 3s. You're seeing, of course, all of the BMD variants, including the BMD-4, which, if it's not directly just Soviet stockpile, they pulled it out of the junkyard or mothball fleet and brought it into service from a mud pile somewhere, then you're quite seeing just they have some very minor upgrades to them. We know that they are losing quite a significant amount of armor, as we've seen T-62s even being brought into the front. And at this point, about the only reason we're not going to see any T-55s, which is the only model prior to that of those new kind of modern those modern tanks, is because they sold most of their T-55s and T-54s, especially to the Iraqi army, which were subsequently then completely annihilated during the First and the Second Gulf War. So that's pretty much what we're seeing here. We do know they're taking quite significant losses, and we're expecting to see further surges of troops. And as we jump down here, as we continue kind of down here along the front line, and we start moving into that southern front, what we end up seeing is that over here in the east, another helo is down. According to the press service for the Air Force Command of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, the Armed Forces of Ukraine shot at a Russian helicopter, a Ka-52, in the east of Ukraine on August the 24th. Ka-52 is also known as the Alligators. It's a very fast attack helicopter, and we've seen them used quite significantly throughout the entirety of this war, despite not being probably their most readily available type of aircraft. It is their most modern. However, the Russians do maintain quite a large fleet of Mi-24 helicopters within all of their variants. But the Ka-52 has proven to be relatively ineffective as a attack helicopter throughout the duration of this war. And we see quite a significant number of them downed, captured, etc. So we don't know how many they have left, and we don't know quite how many, truthfully, that they have lost. So there have been some pretty good guesstimates in there. But at this point, Russia still maintains numerically a dominance when it comes to their air forces. However, it seems that they are lacking trained pilots, and at this point, they're taking enough aircraft losses to kind of reevaluate their situation, and they already did not have air supremacy. As we're continuing here, we see an M777 in action. An M777 is a 155 millimeter NATO artillery gun. It's a towed artillery gun. It's very effective. It's very long range. In fact, most of the weapon systems being given to Ukraine from NATO countries will outrange their Russian counterparts anywhere from between 5 to about 35 kilometers, depending on the weapon system. And so that means that the Russians have to get within 5 kilometers of those max effective range, and just to engage back these artillery systems. While the Russians maintain a 10-to-1 advantage numerically in firepower superiority with their artillery systems there at the front lines, the destruction of these ammunition depots means they cannot sustain the rates of fire that they were merely weeks ago. And we see this through the FIRM's fire map that's put out by the NASA FIRM's satellite, meant to be tracking forest fires and blazes across the world. We see that the blazes in Ukraine, which you can track roughly about where the front lines are there, have quite significantly gone down as Russian shelling simply cannot keep up, as they're running through their ammunition too quickly and cannot continue to maintain these large-scale barrages across the entire front because of these ammunition depots that are being destroyed. We can go ahead and take a look here at this M777 battery in action as it's continuing to pound Russian forces along this entire front line today.
Я русский военный корабль. Предлагаю сложить оружие и сдаться по избежанию кровопролития и неоправданных жертв. В противном случае по вам будет нанесен бомбово-штурмовой удар. Длинный остров. Я русский корабль. Повторяю. Предлагаю сложить оружие, сдаться, иначе по вам будет нанесен удар. Как поняли меня? Прием! Русский военный корабль, иди нахуй!
So they're just over here, they're just, sending a lot of hate and discontent downrange to the Russians. And you gotta love it, folks. You really just gotta love it. As we continue here, we can see we get a tour of the trench networks here. So this is a little bit of a trench tour. This is coming from an American volunteer here on the front line somewhere here within the Donbass. And it's just kind of an interesting little tidbit. But you kind of see what life's like. I've akin this war much more to World War I than about any other war in history. The reason being is because World War I was fought in the way it was fought because war had become so much more deadly than what had been previously seen leading up to it. It was on a scale that was unprecedented even for war in Europe. And that's why trench networks, the creation of the machine gun and the immense volume and effectiveness of artillery meant that the days of the cavalry charge and the days of fixing bayonets were over. It was a absolute slaughter. You're talking hundreds of thousands of troops killed in just the first day of the Battle of the Somme. And you're talking about immense amount of static trench networks and extensive amounts of artillery barrages. You see those very similarities being used here, and questioning whether or not tactics and equipment that's being used now is even adequate to some degree. There have been many people that have called into question whether or not the tank is even still a viable military tool in a day and age where someone can kill it with a missile that costs a tenth of what the tank does and is carried by one guy that can kill a $10 million vehicle and the 3 people inside of it. Now, there is quite a bit of debate, and we can go into that at another time, but that is the level of what we're seeing. The imagery is the same. The trench networks have not differed. It is World War I, but even more horrific in some aspects. And that's kind of what we see here. But go ahead and enjoy this nice little tour from this American volunteer within the Ukrainian trenches. And once again, we actually getting this
great things come.
we're getting this one from TikTok.
Out of being hungry and cold. Once you're pampered, you get lazy.
Home sweet home.
Great things come out.
Bunkers falling apart. God damn, man. Can't catch a fucking break. Super glad. Bunkers falling.
Yeah, that's why you have a drainage. You know, you dig some drainage into your dugouts and bunkers, guys, because it turns into a soup, a not so very nice soup. But the major development today in the title of this video was Independence Day Massacre. Prior to today, President Zelensky and many authorities throughout Ukraine told citizens do not gather, do not do a lot of things, and expected that Russia, because it would be Independence Day in Ukraine, would conduct some rather significant strikes across the country. That has indeed, while Ukraine expected to launch several, at least some kind of a major offensive operations today, which they most certainly have, at least with their artillery, Russia also pulled through on what it was expected of them. Today we had an Independence Day massacre. 15 civilians and upwards of 50 others, or 15 civilians were killed, with 50 others being injured up here in Chaplin. And they were hit. This is at the train station in Chaplin. This is the single deadliest attack on a train station since Kramatorsk. It's not a very big village, too. This was a passenger train that was struck, and it was carrying people that were fleeing from the front lines. Quote, Russian occupiers shelled the passenger cars at Chaplin Station and the Dniprovets region on August 24th. 15 people were killed, and about 50 citizens were injured. The rescue operation is ongoing, and it's coming from President Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine. We have some images here coming from the Ministry of Internal Affairs for Ukraine that is showing the level of destruction that these underwent. As you can see, these train cars are completely burnt out, collapsed, and completely destroyed. These, once again, were carrying passengers that were destined to trying to escape this war and found themselves instead targeted by it. Another massive casualty incident there in Ukraine to mark this, while important but very traumatic and bloody 31st Independence Day for Ukraine. An ammunition depot and an artillery battery were destroyed by Ukrainian forces in the southern front. Quote, the armed forces of Ukraine destroyed a Russian ammunition depot and an enemy 152mm self-propelled howitzer 2S-19 Mista S in the south of Ukraine on August 23rd. That's coming from Operational Command South, which is their southern command force. Over in Tokmak, we also see a small ammunition depot appears to have been hit, and this is because of the subsequent cook-offs. We do have a video from this one, which only happened but a few hours ago. It's a relatively small ammunition depot, not quite as spectacular as some of the others we've seen, especially coming out of, say, Novokhovka, but we certainly can see that amidst the blaze that there was ammunition being stored here. It was likely just an ammunition depot for, say, a company level as opposed to a BTG level ammunition depot. And we can go ahead and take a look. once again, a small ammunition depot destroyed there in Tokmak. It seems that a collaborator was killed. The head of Mikhailivka, which is located here in the Zaporizhzhia Oblast, was actually killed in a car explosion, and this was confirmed by RIA News, which is a state-run media or state-run Russian news agency. This is likely the work of Ukrainian partisans. Something that we don't hear a lot about, and something that a lot more of this information will come out after the victory in Ukraine has been secured, is the immense amount of sacrifice that the partisans are giving. The partisans are akin to the French resistance during Nazi occupation within Europe, and all of those resistance movements that were ongoing. They have done some pretty impressive things. They have demoralized troops behind the line. They've assassinated high-level government officials within the military-civilian government, occupational government. They have killed, they have reported on locations of, ammunition depots and other stuff, communication networks, commanding officers, important figures. They have killed Russian troops. They have sabotaged. They have continued to push out, warnings to the Russians of what's ongoing in this region, and that they are there and that they are willing to do it. It's estimated that about 200 Russian troops have been killed as a result of partisan activity throughout the entirety of Ukraine within the occupied areas. Once again, most of the stuff we will not be able to, hear about or know what really happened until after the war in Ukraine has ended and these areas have been liberated. But the immense amount of sacrifice that some of these people are putting through, despite being under complete Russian occupation, and they're still resisting. We can go ahead and take a look at some of this here. Ah, nice. Soviet uniform. Of course, we're getting some of this from Telegram news channels. And there he is. He has reportedly been killed. Let's move over here to Novokakhovka. Novokakhovka got struck again. It would appear to be about the third day in a row now that Novokakhovka has been struck. Once again, the dam area was targeted by the Ukrainian army. Multiple explosions were heard around the city as airstrikes failed to be, or as their air defense systems failed. They were unable to successfully pick up these strikes or at least respond in a meaningful manner. And why are they striking the bridge? Ukrainians do not want to destroy the bridge. Destroying the bridge floods everything downriver, especially places like, Kherson, the main objective within this area. So it's not good for them. And it's also major for electricity, getting electricity moving because you can use hydroelectric power. But there is a roadway that runs across the dam. It's pretty much, we know that roadway has been rendered pretty much ineffective, and I think we're seeing a double tap here is really what we're seeing. But that roadway, destroying both this roadway and the roadway over the Antonovsky Bridge outside of Kherson, means that there is no meaningful way to resupply forces north of the Dnipro River. The Russians can't bring in any meaningful amounts of supplies, equipment, or reinforcements to make any kind of difference. And at that point, it's just waiting for the Russians to buckle underneath the lack of support, supplies, and fresh troops and equipment. They are eventually going to have to run out. And if they don't run out of that, they will end up eventually running out of food. So it's just waiting for the Russians to buckle and making sure that they do not repair the Antonovsky Bridge or the bridge or the roadway next to the dam over here at Novokakhovka, simply because if you knock those out, the only way to get supplies across is ferry, and the last time we saw that was when the Ukrainians attempted to do it during the Battle of Severodonetsk and Lysychansk across the Seversky Donets River. And it didn't work out very well. The Ukrainians pretty much pulled out of Severodonetsk within a couple of days, immediately following those bridges being destroyed. But we can see some of this here. Go ahead and take a look.
Ёбаный в рот. Ёбаный в рот.
So you don't have to collapse entire sections of a bridge to render it useless. You just have to make it so that way it's too unstable to drive anything heavy across it, and magically you can't get supplies, or tanks, or any type of armored vehicles, or trucks, or cars, or anything else really across it that you would need to in order to make supply even viable. As you move up here, this is in Novi Bu, and we see that 9 citizens were injured in shelling today. Quote, rocket attacks in the city of Novi Bu in the Mykolaiv region on August 24th. 9 citizens were injured, including 2 children. Local residential buildings were damaged. That's coming from Vitaly Kim, who's the head of the Mykolaiv Regional Military Administration. But when it comes to inside of Ukraine, that's actually everything. But that doesn't mean we don't have some big news outside of Ukraine as well, especially dealing with the country itself. Of course, you may have heard that there are some rather significant developments between allied countries and supplying Ukraine as well. But we jump over here immediately and we begin to take a look at Russia, which is what we start off with when it comes to the international news. And we see that over here in Oriol, that an unknown person threw 2 Molotov cocktails into the central entrance of an administration building there in Oriol region. And that's according to its governor, Andrei Klishkov. The fire was promptly extinguished. When extinguishing, one of the employees did receive burns. Let me take a look. He's going to ride up here on his bicycle, broad daylight, and he's going to light some Molotov cocktails. Yeah, whoever opened that door, not very good. Not very smart of you. Very, very nice. We can see where that fire did end up burning here, right there at the entrance. So not a lot of damage, but it sends a signal, and that is quite significant of a signal. Unrest is slowly but surely developing within Russia. This war has gone on a lot longer, and there's a lot of questions that are starting to be asked by the population. More and more bodies continue to return home. Why is the war not over yet? Russia's tried to give some answers, but it's very hard, even with the Russians not repatriating most of their dead, meaning they're not taking most of their dead back. Even though it's been offered to them by Ukraine, who's keeping them in large refrigerated, freight cars for trains, they aren't repatriating them. They're not bringing them back. And what has ended up happening is, even without doing that, only doing a small fraction, the amount of dead that have been brought back to Russia is quickly growing. And it's very obvious, especially in areas that aren't Moscow, aren't St. Petersburg, places that, these areas might consider lesser Russians, places like Dagestan or Chechnya, or places out in Siberia. They are pretty much getting most of the casualties, as those are the people that are in the military. They also have the highest conscription numbers within Russia. You want to keep the people in St. Petersburg and Moscow usually relatively happy. You don't conscript them. You don't force them into the military. Those are your intellectuals. Those are your true Muscovites, your true Russians. And everyone else is just kind of a lesser party. And what other opportunities do you have in Dagestan? What other opportunities do you have in Siberia? Subsistence farming, just trying to make it get by and not freeze to death in the winter. does not quite sound very appealing, but the military is definitely a good opportunity if that's your case. Up here in Moscow, it would appear that Putin's motorcade has rushed back to the Kremlin here in the middle of the night. This was seen as the Duma has announced an emergency meeting tomorrow to issue a special statement on Ukraine. The last time that this happened was on June the 25th, which we reported on. It didn't result in anything, but the thing is that there is concern as to whether or not there will be an announcement of at least partial, if not general, mobilization of Russia, meaning Russia going to war and turning its entire population to that cause. What that may bring, we don't know. There's been a lot of questions as to whether or not the population would continue on with this when they are at total war. And the fact is, we just don't know. The Russians keep everyone guessing, especially Putin, and it's just it's hard to tell. But hopefully, we'll get some updates regarding that tomorrow, especially from the Duma themselves. You can go ahead and take a look. And so we jump over here, and the reason I put this in the North Sea is because it's between Norway and the United Kingdom, as both Norway and the UK have teamed up to donate micro drones to Ukraine. Norway announced that the UK will purchase Norwegian-made Black Hornet micro drones to help Ukraine fight Russia, the Norwegian Defense Ministry said in a statement on Wednesday. The micro drone is estimated at 90 million Norwegian kroner, or $9.1 million USD. The drones are no bigger than a mobile phone and can be trained in 20 minutes. These things are really cool. We have in the United States something quite similar to them. They're like these tiny little helicopters, and they come in this pack. It looks kind of like a small battery pack, and it has a console in the center, and it's a charging station too. And you on both ends, you can lift up those little two ends, and there's little helicopters inside of them. You pull them out, it unplugs them from their charging station, and you can literally just launch them and fly them right from the same control panel. Bring them back, put them in their slot, recharge them. It's really, really cool. They are super tiny, super lightweight, and very effective. They're just used for reconnaissance, but you never, if you're trying to find drones, if you're watching for drones, everyone's looking for quadcopters, you would never spot this thing, ever. You would never spot it, and that's very important if you're trying to get the drop on somebody. As we're jumping down here and we start rolling into the Middle East, we have a couple of different developments here inside of Syria. The first one is that the 2 Islamic State militants were actually detained there in Idlib, Syria, which is located right there in kind of the Aleppo area. This is coming, so the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or HTS-controlled General Security Services, announced the detention of 2 Islamic State militants in the province of Idlib. The detainees were citizens of Uzbekistan. During a search of their houses of the jihadists, weapons, IEDs, as well as stolen money and jewelry were seized. According to the GSS, the detainees were involved in the assassination of one of the field commanders of the Uzbek Katiba, Tahid wal-Jihad, and the elimination of militants of the HTS and the Jaish al-Haqqar groups, and we can see that here. So those are the weapons that they were saying that they had found. And mobile phones, hand grenades, an AK with a suppressor on it, more hand grenades, and those are the 2 militants. That's not the only thing that's been happening. So we reported yesterday, as we were kind of backtracking, regarding situations that were ongoing between coalition forces and Iranian-backed forces within Syria. It would appear that once again today, coalition forces were actually hit with rockets there at both the Conoco gas fields and the Omar oil fields down in southern Syria, or in kind of northeastern Syria. right here along the Euphrates River Valley, these are areas that I actually spent quite an amount of time in. I was actually down here for quite a significant amount of time during my first deployment, especially in these general vicinities, in this general area. This is actually in retaliation as a result of the strikes that occurred on the 14th and 15th of August, which were against coalition forces. The United States authorized precision airstrikes against targets of the Iranian-backed militias and also of IRGC members training these militiamen. Roughly 6 to 10 local and foreign fighters are reportedly to have been killed within Deir ez-Zor province, as well as including about 3 or so members of the Iranian Republican Guard Corps, or the IRGC. And after that, as an immediate result, those who survived ended up launching rocket attacks against the plants here at the Conoco gas fields and the Omar oil fields, located here in kind of near Kasham and Al-Suwar. So that's kind of what we're seeing here. There was an official statement regarding the strikes themselves coming from the U.S. Central Command and Operation and Combined Joint Task Force Operation Inherent Resolve. But you can see here kind of the smoke plume coming up from over by the Omar oil fields there. And then I believe this is the joint statement. No, it's not. But we can go ahead and take a look. I do know that there are quite an extensive amount of combat helicopters that are located within this region. So it's very possible that they did conduct some strikes with some Apaches. It would make a lot of sense that they would. But that's kind of what we're seeing coming out of Syria at this point. We don't know of any casualties or anything ongoing. When an incident like this occurs, what happens is coalition forces, Americans specifically, go into what is known as River City. They go into River City. What that means is that all communication with the outside world is cut, usually for at least 24 hours. This allows for any information to, not be leaked, over the internet or to loved ones, and start bringing up a lot of questions and comments regarding it. And bringing a lot of press to the eye, especially when you're talking about Syria. There's a lot of stuff happening in Syria, and not all of it is stuff that maybe governments would like anyone to know about. I do know that there are special military operations ongoing within the region. I don't know of any active ones at this point, as most of the ones that I, knew of are over by now, by several years. But the main thing is that there is still active fighting ongoing inside of Syria. The civil war is still ongoing as well, and the Islamic State, as well as other issues with Turkey and whatnot, have really exacerbated that problem quite significantly. As you jump over here into Kabul, and just north of Kabul here in Afghanistan, the resistance front actually attacked a checkpoint. So the Taliban over here, this is near Kapisa, Kapisa, Afghanistan. The resistance front attacked a Taliban checkpoint. Right now, local sources are saying that 3 Taliban were killed and 3 were wounded in the attack. And at that point, we just don't have any further information or really anything to follow up on. We do know that there is an active resistance movement on several different fronts, one of which is being led by Ahmed al-Massoud II. His father actually fought against the Taliban as one of the leaders of the Northern Alliance, and actually assisted coalition forces with pushing the Taliban out of power within Afghanistan at the beginning of the war in Afghanistan back in 2001-2002. So he is also following kind of in his father's footsteps, and the Taliban have been unable to completely consolidate their holdings in Afghanistan because of his very heavily backed resistance movement. And at that point, we start to move our way down here, and we go into Africa. This is up by the Tigray region of Ethiopia, an area that is heavily affected by everything that's been ongoing with climate change, and has been very affected by just food insecurities and water insecurities. Ethiopia, Somalia, these areas have suffered for quite some time with food and water insecurities, going back several decades. The Tigray region of Ethiopia actually ends up being an area that 90% of the people, the Tigray region being right here, 90% of the people within this region are actually require humanitarian aid to survive. It's quite insane, actually, and that's coming from the World Food Program, who has stated that. And so that's the UN-led initiative. And we do know that they do attempt to get convoys, but there has been fighting up in this region that has flared back up between the Ethiopian government and the TPLF rebels. With this new information, the fighting is in the area north of the city of Kobo, where the arrival reinforcements of the Ethiopian army were seen just a few days ago. The government of the country has announced the destruction of certain aircraft which were supposed to deliver weapons to the rebels in Tigray. And we can take a look at some of this here. So this is where they're spotting that fighting is currently ongoing. Go ahead and take a look.
ጀግናው የመከላከያ ሰራዊት ወደ ከቆቦ እያለፈ ነው። በጣም በሚገርም ድባብ ወደ አለማጣ አቅጣጫ በጣም ደስ ሲል
Humanitarian aid reaching these regions, such as the Tigray, is already extremely difficult, especially as the world food crisis continues to exacerbate that issue. But the fighting flaring back up within this region is going to really cause a lot of people to suffer. Within these regions of Africa, the most vulnerable part of the population is children, specifically the ages 5 and under, where 1.8 million children within this region are anywhere from between acute to severely malnourished, and with several hundreds of thousands of them, upwards of 600,000, at risk of immediately being, dying of malnutrition within this region. It is quite terrible. And most of this region, because of the war in Ukraine and the lack of supplies and food supplies that are flowing out of Ukraine, what ends up happening is their rations have been cut by, in some cases, half. In the words of the chief of the World Food Program, we're taking food from the hungry to give it to the starving. As we jump over here to the United States, coming out of Washington, D.C. tonight, while there has been quite a lot of stuff ongoing and a lot of rumors flying, one rumor has been confirmed, and that is that a $3 billion USD aid package has been announced by the Department of Defense that will be going to Ukraine. It comes in just under $3 billion to be exact. It's about $2.9 billion, but it comes in with 6 NASAMS, which are a mobile anti-aircraft platform. It's very effective and has been developed by the United States. 245,000 rounds of 155 millimeter howitzer munitions, 65,000 rounds or 120 millimeter mortars, Puma drones, which are very effective and they're very cool drone systems that are very easy to transport. 24 counter artillery radars, Vampire counter UAS, which I've never used before in my life, so I'm quite interested to know, as well as laser guided rocket systems. Which means even more precision strike capability for the Ukrainian troops. And that's something that we're seeing. We can actually go here. This is the immediate press release directly from the Department of Defense website regarding everything that they're going to be bringing to the field. The United States, since 2021, since January 2021, has committed more than $13.5 billion in security assistance. In total, since 2014, the United States committed $15.5 billion in security assistance to Ukraine. And this is the largest package yet to have been given to the country of Ukraine, and this is just one package out of something that's going to be very long term. We're going to see that continual follow-on packages out of this. This just happens to be an extensively large. This is huge. This is a massive amount of equipment and supplies being sent to Ukraine. And that allows us to start going into the very interesting news and kind of wrap things up when it comes to, going through and trying to be a little bit more uplifting. The fact of the matter is that the news is, is a little bit kind of depressing. That's why we take a personal day off every Monday. The news is kind of down. It gets you down. It's a lot of death and destruction and war and famine and drought and pestilence and all sorts of stuff. And we try at the end of the day, every single day, to try and bring you something interesting and bring you something kind of make you feel a little bit happier. Now, I see that Caffeine has asked a question, and they have stated, curious about the vampire's targeting capabilities. I do not know. I've never had to use a vampire, or I've never even really heard of it. When I was in Syria back in 2017, 2018, we really didn't have any counter UAV equipment with us. What we ended up doing is the Islamic State would use quadcopters that they quite literally just bought off of Amazon, and they would fix grenades to them, and we would shoot at them. Not very effective, because it's really hard to shoot down a UAV, like a quadcopter drone with a rifle, especially at night. So most of the time I would just take my PEC laser sight, and I would turn it on high infrared, and I would hit it with my laser, and that would eventually burn out the camera on the actual drone itself, and that would cause them to not be able to fly around. They would crash into something and burn. So I've never used or had the opportunity to use counter UAV or UAS equipment. So I really just don't know. I don't know how any of it works. I've never really, and I don't have any research I've ever done on it. So I'll have to find out for you. Hopefully we can kind of follow up with that for you tomorrow. But to begin on this kind of good news here, we jump down here to Israel to start. And Israel has unveiled a 1,200-year-old desert mansion. Israeli archaeologists unveiled a 1,200-year-old mansion on Tuesday, broadening knowledge of the southern desert region where a mosque was recently discovered. The discovery dates to the early Islamic period in the 8th or 9th century or so. And the home boasted marble-paved hallway and the walls decorated with frescoes, and the remains of oil lamps were unearthed in storage rooms underground along with a cistern. I'm going to go ahead and take a look. This is coming from the Daily Sabah. This is quite an interesting dig site. This is very interesting to take a look at. It's a pretty major excavation that they have ongoing here. But this area has a ton of history behind it. It's super cool. And I can't talk highly enough at all of the work that is done within this region and how much history there is. When you're talking about, say, Jerusalem, it's just a city built upon a city, built upon a city, built upon a city, built upon a city. It's insane, the level of depth of history that is in Jerusalem alone, and they still find stuff. They're still finding stuff. This region is considered a holy site for almost every single, it's a holy site for the Jewish people, it's a holy site for the Christians, it's a holy site for the Muslims. It's a hugely important region for a large group of the world. And you're naming several of the top leading religions within this. You had Assyria, you had the Jewish people, you had all sorts of different factions within this region throughout history, and it's just impressive. It's an impressive amount of history, and I really can't wait to learn more about it. But it's cool that they're finding some more stuff, and that someone 1,200 years ago was willing to build a mansion in the middle of the desert. Not quite sure why, but so it is. As we jump up here to Sofia, over here in Bulgaria, a teen has become the youngest person to fly solo around the world. The British-Belgian team became the youngest person to fly solo around the world on Wednesday after a 5-month journey. Cheers went up as the 17-year-old Mac Rutherford landed at an airfield near the Bulgarian capital, Sofia, after flying 54,124 kilometers, or 33,631 miles, and visiting more than 30 countries since he departed at the same site in his Shark Aero microlight airplane on March 23rd. His journey broke 2 Guinness Books of World Records. Rutherford became the youngest person to fly around the world solo, taking the title from Travis Ludlow, who was 18 when he completed his attempt last year. He also is the youngest person to fly around the world in a microlight aircraft. The title was held previously by sister Zara, who completed her own trip around the globe in January this year. Rutherford, who gained his pilot's license in 2020 when he was 15 after training with his father, hopes his 5-month voyage will encourage young people to pursue their dreams. That's pretty cool. I want to get my pilot's license. But yeah, that's so pretty cool. See that, and some, I mean, he's 17. He got his pilot's license and he's flown around the world. I mean, I wish I could do that. And to wrap up the last news segment of the night, something that we had talked about a little bit yesterday was we were talking about Artemis. And that was at the very end of the stream after we were talking about the James Webb Telescope images. Well, I couldn't remember the exact dates. I knew it was the end of the month or early into next month. Artemis 1 is a go. NASA has officially said that their Mega Moon rocket will launch at 8:33 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on Monday, August the 29th. The uncrewed Orion spacecraft will go on a 6-week mission around the moon and back to Earth. During Artemis 1, Orion will lift off aboard the Space Launch System, or SLS rocket, and travel 280,000 miles, or 450,000 kilometers from Earth, and 40,000 miles, or 64,000 kilometers beyond the far side of the moon before it comes back to Earth using its gravitational pull. So pretty impressive news coming from NASA. Go ahead and take a look.
Artemis stands ready. Ready to turn dreams into reality. Ready to return humanity to the moon and take us further than ever before. The culmination of inspiration and innovation, of Herculean efforts and steadfast collaboration, Artemis 1 is ready for departure. And the Artemis generation is about to leave its mark.
What will be a journey of more than 500,000 miles to the moon and back starts right here at Launch Complex 39 Bravo. Although this first flight will not carry a crew, it will test every system in the deep depths of space to prepare the way for future crewed missions.
When the final go is given and the teams at Kennedy Space Center release this rocket, Artemis will roar to life and we will witness the beginning of a tightly choreographed mission.
All engine run 2, 1, and liftoff.
The first 2.5 minutes lift Artemis off Earth and build momentum. It's another 6 minutes of pressing uphill, accelerating to orbit. This is followed by a push from the second stage to raise Orion higher.
And once all the systems are cleared to continue, the second stage will fire again and push Orion beyond the bounds of Earth. At this point, we're going to the moon. It'll take several days to reach our destination, but as we sprint across the void, many new procedures and systems will be tested and proven.
240,000 miles later, Orion will enter an oval-shaped orbit around the moon, one that will take Orion to about 60 miles above the lunar surface and then out to 40,000 miles beyond the moon. This is a distance farther than any human-rated spacecraft has ever gone before.
As momentous as reaching the moon will be, returning to Earth is just as significant and challenging. Every observation we make, every lesson we learn on this journey prepares the way for humans to safely venture out and return home. And so on its final lap around the moon, Orion will ignite its main engine, push out of lunar orbit, and begin the long trek home.
This is a spacecraft built for the harsh conditions of deep space, as well as the intensity of returning home. Nearing Earth, Orion separates from the main power and propulsion systems of the European Service Module and prepares for the final sequence of events. Entering Earth's atmosphere at 24,500 miles per hour, the heat shield endures the fury of re-entry. The air around Orion reaches temperatures half as hot as the sun, but also slows Orion considerably. Until finally, parachutes can deploy, allowing Orion to gently dip into the Pacific Ocean.
To the moon and safely home again. This is the journey of Artemis 1, and it will set the precedent for all that follows. United with partners around the world, this is the challenge we choose. To meet hand in hand, step by step, lighting the way from the Earth to the moon to Mars and beyond. We are ready.
So that is the full video coming from NASA regarding the announcement of their Artemis 1 mission. So the cool thing about the Artemis 1 missions is that, or that the Artemis missions is that it's humanity going back to the moon. This will be the first time in decades that people will set foot on the moon. Artemis 2, I believe, is going to be crewed. And that will be a flyby of the moon with a crewed mission. And then Artemis 3, I believe, is going to be the one that actually lands on the moon. There will be follow-on Artemis missions, and what this is all leading up to, finally, is that they're going to be actually setting up a moon base. NASA is planning on establishing a lunar base on the surface and a lunar colony. That is what the Artemis missions are going to do. The first missions are going to be sending people back to the moon, you know, going to that stuff and setting that up. And that is actually going to allow us to pave the way just to go to, say, Mars. Because the moon is in our backyard as opposed to what Mars is, you know, being, you know, tens of, you know, almost insane numbers of miles away from Earth. And so it's much safer to test things on the moon, where you have much better travel windows. You know, test different techniques, test new equipment, test new things that, you know, how to survive and establish a colony. Because once you get to Mars, that's going to be a semi-permanent colony, at the very least. It's not easy to get back from Mars once you get to Mars, and so it's. The moon allows us to test things, and that's the whole point. One, we get back onto the moon. We get started back going out into, you know, the, well, as Star Trek would put it, the final frontier, the next, you know, and that's the cool thing. I mean, humanity as a species is we're going to expand into space. And we're going to do things like asteroid mining, which is going to make a lot of things insanely cheap. We're going to do things like we're going to go to Mars, and we're going to terraform planets. And while many of these things are going to be generations from now, it's still something that we will get to at least see the beginning of in our own lifetime here, starting with the launch on August the 29th. But that is actually it for all of the news tonight. I hope that you guys have enjoyed, or at least found at the very least any of this knowledgeable. There's a ton of stuff that's obviously been happening, and while as cool as Artemis and as cool as, you know, circumnavigating the world on an aircraft as a 17-year-old is, most of that, you know, most of the stuff that is being said here on the news is and getting reported on is usually pretty bad. It's usually pretty down, depressing, not very uplifting. But the great thing is that you guys have built an amazing community. You guys have built an awesome community here on this channel, and I cannot thank you enough for it, because you allow us to be the news that gives back. And how does that work? Check out the video description of every single video we do, and you'll find that there is a ton of different organizations down there that are for all sorts of different crises throughout the globe. And I'm not just talking about Ukraine, but I'm talking about the immense amount of drought in Somalia and the Horn of Africa. I'm talking about talking about Southeast Asia, which is ravaged by Super Typhoon Rai several months ago. And we're constantly looking to expand upon this list. And hopefully you guys, if you have one, you'll jump on board and you'll go onto our Discord. The link's also in the description. You'll get in touch with the staff members. Send us more links. We want more organizations to be able to support. And we're never doing super chats on this channel. We're never pushing merchandising. 100% of everything we do is for charity. It's for humanitarian purposes. It's to help people. So thank you very much for those that have been supporting us so much over the last few months and as we've continued on this project. And if you can't give a lot to these organizations, give a little. And if you can't give anything at all, that's perfectly okay too. Help us grow this. The more people that are here, the more people that enjoy the way that we do the news, the more people overall that the more of an impact that we as a community will have. And that's really what I want to do. One of our goals, we're going to have once we get to the point where we can do fundraising on streams, we're going to put a fundraiser on every single stream without failure. And one of the goals that we have is to raise $1 million through the charity streams. We want to raise $1 million with just charity streams alone. So we hope to get to that point hopefully in the near future. But in the meantime, I hope that you guys have enjoyed. Please have a safe night. We'll see you hopefully back here again at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 p.m. Central Time. And I really hope that you, your family, and your friends remain safe. If not, I really hope you find that safety and security in the very near future. I really don't want one of the viewers to get added to the statistics of what we're talking about here on the channel. I really do not. So please be safe. Please be courteous. I hope that you guys have a wonderful Thursday. I hope you have a wonderful as we start to move into this week. Congratulations, you've made it to the halfway point in your week. If you're from Ukraine, I hope you had a wonderful Independence Day, and I hope that you ended up safe and were able to at least celebrate to some kind of an extent. And congratulations, you guys have made it through 6 months. So with that, my name is Paul from the New News. Please have a fantastic rest of your night, guys, and hopefully we will see you once again tomorrow. See you later.
Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять до волновахи, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Нам не треба ні конфлікту, ні війни. Та ми готові всіх вас звать до сатани. Тисячі вже полягло, і все більше шверхуйло. То для них нема нічого, крім труни. Russian soldiers going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять до волновахи, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Вызволять пришел, братишка, ну привет. На моей земле тебе один ответ. Нашим людям с кирпичом, даже танки и бачок. Вам не взять нас и за 100 000 лет. Going home, Russian soldiers going home. змішаємо з багном. Від стрия до волноваги чутно кличі, дітям нахуй, тут працює ЗСУ і ТРО.